Hello, patrons of the Space Coast Symphony Orchestra. My name is Dr. Jacob Craig, and I'm the Director of Music and Arts here at First Presbyterian Church in Vero Beach. It is a true privilege to be with you during this very interesting time and to do a little bit of a variety show concert for you today. I was very, very pleased to be asked by your really extraordinary conductor and maestro, Aaron. So we have a variety of different things for you today. We're going to start off actually with the harpsichord. This is an instrument that I was very privileged to inherit when I came here, and we have one of our very fantastic Vero Beach local artists has done the inside of the lid. And one of the things that's interesting about the harpsichord, of course, is it's the predecessor to the pianoforte, which, of course, turned into the grand piano here behind me once they developed cast iron, so they could have more tension on the strings. So the harpsichord is very limited in its amount of keys because the entire soundboard is wood. And so all of the string tension has to be only on wood pieces, and if the strings were higher or lower than this kind of format, the strings would just rip out because there's too much tension. Another interesting thing is that the harpsichord operates on a system called plectra instead of hammers like the piano. So the plectra actually are little pieces of quill that pluck the string as you press down on the key. It plucks the string up, very similar to the way the hammer strikes the string on the piano, but in this particular case, in the harpsichord, it actually plucks it, which gives it that very unique sound. So, starting off today with the harpsichord first, we're going to be doing a little Bach for you. This is Bach Prelude 21 in B flat, and the fugue that accompanies it. This is from the Well-Tempered Clavier, of course, one of the most famous works of keyboard music that Bach wrote. He wrote it indeed on this instrument, on the harpsichord. And as is typical with many different things, there's a lot of academic conflict with whether or not the key of B flat major is something that is supposed to be majestic and very powerful, or whether it's supposed to be kind of dark and somber. Regardless, Bach wrote this one in a much more majestic and powerful sort of way. The prelude is particularly interesting because it has seemingly a cadenza in the middle of the prelude. You get it going with a couple thematic iterations, and all of a sudden we have a stop and a bit of a cadenza section. And then the fugue is a very memorable, wonderful fugal thematic. So here is Bach Prelude and Fugue in B flat, number 21 from the Well-Tempered Clavier. Now for the piano, we're going to play a little bit of Chopin. This is Chopin's Raindrop Prelude, as the colloquial expression is. This is his Prelude in D flat major. Chopin did a really phenomenal job of kind of bringing out linear line in the piano. One of the things that makes the piano something that is to be mastered over time is the fact that you can make a percussive type instrument sound linear, have these beautiful melodic lines similar to a vocalist or a string player might have. We have the difficulty with the pianos as soon as you play a note, it immediately starts to decay. You can't hold a note and sustain it and allow it to crescendo or to increase in sound because you've struck the note and now that sound is immediately going to dissipate. So creating this linear line is something that's particularly difficult, and arguably Chopin is one of the better composers who have done that, which is why he's called the poet of the piano. So this is the Chopin Raindrop Prelude in D flat major. Returning back to the harpsichord now, William Byrd, a very famous English composer. He composed for a wide variety of mediums. There's a lot of famous choral pieces by him. One of the things he did is he did an entire collection of what's called virginal music, another kind of slang term for the harpsichord, especially ones made for the indoors, or virginals. And so this is my Lady Neville's book of virginal music, and that has a huge collection of different pieces meant to be played and performed in the home. Obviously, the harpsichord is a very soft-sounding instrument, especially compared to the capabilities of the modern piano. And these were really meant to be these kind of chamber pieces that would happen in the homes. And so this particular one is a couple pieces from a set he wrote, which is supposed to represent the idea of war. And so the first one is called the flute and the drum, or the flute and the drum, of course. And then the second piece is called the march to the fight. And you're supposed to actually envision with these two pieces what we would know in colonial America, of course, is like the little fife and the drum, the steady beat leading the soldiers into battle, and then they actually arrive at the battle, and you can hear the battle develop, which is very interesting. So this is William Byrd, the flute and the drum, and the march to the fight. Okay, so after a little bit of wartime on the harpsichord, we're going to go back to a little more tender moment. Jules Massenet obviously wrote Thais, which is a phenomenal work, and meditation from it is one of the more well-known pieces. Normally you'll hear this done as a violin solo with orchestral accompaniment. And I was looking, and I thought for sure that the piano version of this was a transcription. It was very interesting to find out some history behind this, and that Massenet actually transcribed the Thais meditation himself, for himself. He loved to play this piece on the piano. It was a very just lovely melody, and so here is the meditation from Thais by Massenet. Okay, now we're going to move on to a little bit of jazz. This is a fun piece, Miles Davis, all blues. So, if you're not familiar with jazz, jazz grew out of actually a regular concept employed in the Baroque era, in that the idea of a da capo section, where you have a section you go through, and then on the repeat, you kind of show what your capabilities are. We had these in da capo arias through opera and in many other facets, and jazz kind of not reinvented, but kind of repackaged that form. And so now what you have is we play through what's called the head, which is the original melody, and then you're supposed to go back and solo based upon that melody, based upon the feel, or taking your listeners through a whole different journey. So this first piece is a blues, which is a very short 12-measure, simple form of jazz, maybe the most composed over ever. And this is called All Blues by Miles Davis. To finish off the piano section of this concert, another jazz piece. This is a up-tempo piece called There Will Never Be Another You by Harry Warren and Mac Gordon. The basic premise is still the same. You have the head, you have the repeating melodic figures, except this one is what we call up, which is its own genre, which means as fast as possible. All right, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude this virtual concert, I want to again thank you so much for being patrons of the Space Coast Symphony Orchestra, and especially Maestro Aaron, really significant human being there. This is, in my hands, a small pipe, which is indeed, just as it sounds, nice and simple, a small version of the bagpipe. One of the things that's interesting about this is it functions exactly like the Great Highland Bagpipe. You have the 3 drones, a chanter for the fingering of the melody, and of course the blow stick to actually put air in the bag for sustained sound. The difference is this was invented in 1981. And what had happened is coming out of that kind of folk movement coming in the 60s and 70s, there's a real desire for musicians to simply just collaborate with each other at every instance possible. And so one of the issues with the bagpipe is that it a little bit kind of takes over any ensemble that exists because it's a bagpipe. And so someone came up with the idea of inventing the small pipe, and this is very, very soft. It's meant to be indoors, and it's very easy to change the pitching of the conical shape to make it in different concert keys. Normally the bagpipe sits around somewhere around 482 hertz, and that is not concert pitch. And these are concert-pitched instruments, and so you can play with guitars and with other kinds of instruments. So this is a small pipe, and I'm going to be playing a variety of different pieces for you. The first is going to be a slow air, and then we're going to go into a couple of fun tunes, a series of jigs, and then a series of hornpipes. And that will conclude this concert. Thank you very much again for all you do, and I wish you very well during this time.